Good evening, gentlemen. Nice talking to you again. And I'm today going to talk on the India China border problem. As you all are aware, just now there has been the BRICS meeting in Johannesburg, and both Prime Minister Mody and President Yi attended it and did have a small meeting on the sidelines. But that's about all. I don't think anything much transpired in that meeting because the situation on the border still remains tense. Now, I will say it is tense, yes, but I am not very sure that the Chinese are interested in a disengagement. We must remember one thing, and I've explained in my earlier videos, that the border problem has to be solved by India. In the other words, whoever is the Indian Prime Minister, and now it is Mr. Narendra Modi, he has to bite the bullet. The old psychosis of fear is the key. That is not going to work now. India has to be bold enough to sign the border agreement with China, and maybe, and I'm not saying something strange, it will have to be weighted in favor of the Chinese. For the simple reason that, as per the law, ownership of a piece of land means you own 9 tenths of the legal right. Now, as we are all aware, China took over all these areas, which I don't want to go into details now, many decades back, and the Indians didn't know about it. But India still continues to show those areas, particularly Aksai Chin, as part of India. Now, why India should show beats my imagination, because we do not have the capability, the wherewithal to take even 10 miles of territory back from China. So, why are we provoking the Chinese more and more by showing Aksai Chin as a part of India? And at the same time, I think in the last meeting, Modi had requested President Xi to accept the line of actual control. Now, accepting the line of actual control is not a solution to the border problem. The border problem is something which has been inherited from the British. The British Raj created this problem, there's no doubt about it, because they occupied lots of areas in Aksai Chin and Northeast Frontier agencies to make the Indian state more cohesive and easy to defend. They also created a buffer in Tibet. Now, either India should have followed up that, which we didn't do it, but we cannot keep harping on the British concept of the line of control when we don't have the wherewithal even to move up to that line. In Ladakh, it is the Johnson line, and we are more than 300 kilometers away from that line, as the entire area has been occupied by China. I don't think any reasonable or prudent military general will tell you that we can go and capture that area back. So there has to be a solution. As for the Eastern Front is concerned, bear in mind that in the 62 war, the Chinese had come just out to 30 miles off Tezpur. The deputy commissioner had run away, and the Chinese at that time declared a unilateral ceasefire and went back. That's the point. And they went back to the borders because they wanted a settlement at that time, because China was weak and they were scared of the American Seventh Fleet in the South China Sea and the Eastern Pacific. So, gentlemen, I think the ball is in India's court. And somebody once asked me, he told me, why should we give away Indian territory to China? I will counter it by saying that, first of all, India never had control over that territory. That's number one. Number two, historically, for the last, I don't think, hundreds of years, no Indian king or emperor ever had control over Ladakh or even the Northeast Frontier Agency that is called Arunachal Pradesh now. You talk of Aurangzeb, which had the biggest empire, talk of Ashok, none of them had any control over these areas. It's only the British who had the control, and they created the artificial border and tried to sanctify it by holding the Simla Conference of 1913, which was not signed by the approved by the Chinese government. Gentlemen, so what is the border solution? We cannot continue like this. The Indian army keeps on facing the Chinese and the Chinese keep facing us, because in a military conflict, in a short conflict, it's going to be a different kettle of fish fighting the Chinese than fighting Pakistan. No wonder Narendra Modi blows hot and cold against Pakistan, but he doesn't talk anything about China. I wonder if you have noticed it. I don't think the Indian Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister ever condemned China on Tibet, number one. The Indians have also never given support to the Tibetan government in exile, and a number of times the Indians have restricted the movements of the Dalai Lama in deference to the Chinese. Again, India doesn't talk about Xinjiang and the persecution of the Muslims, and the OIC also is absolutely silent about it. And then we don't talk about Hong Kong, which has been trampled by the Chinese, and we don't talk about Formosa as an alternative to China because we don't want to antagonize the Chinese. Even Joe Biden recently went around and made a statement, President Xi was a dictator, and the Chinese didn't like it. But can you expect the Indian Prime Minister to make any such statement? I don't think so. So, gentlemen, when you are not in a position to confront the Chinese and you cannot read their mind, and just I would like to remind my listeners that before the Galwan clash, Prime Minister Modi had met President Xi 19 times, and he couldn't gauge the mind of the Chinese president. And then came the Chinese incursions, first in Doklam, then they came in Galwan. 20 Indian soldiers died for nothing. Gentlemen, at that time also, Mr. Modi didn't condemn the Chinese, and all he did was to make a statement in Parliament that, well, Chinese haven't taken any territory, and that, as everybody knows, was not true. I'll not comment further on it because Chinese have been slowly slicing away Indian territory in Ladakh, and now they don't even recognize the McMahon line. Perhaps the closest we had come to a solution was in, I think, 1960 or early 59, when Prime Minister Chow and Lai had come to Delhi and spent almost a week there. He met the entire Indian leadership, like Morarji Desai, Govind Vallabh Pant, Pandit Nehru, including the Defense Minister Krishna Menon, and the Army Chief also had a say in at that time, and I think he was General Timaya. And the Chinese had made a very wonderful proposal, I will say, very pragmatic proposal. They had said they would recognize the McMahon line in the east as the border because they had recognized the McMahon line which existed in Burma. And since you have no control over Aksai Chin, they said it's a de facto Chinese territory, so you forget about Aksai Chin, hand over to us, and we'll have a border settlement. Well, I don't know whether it would have really taken place or no, but we rejected that offer, that the Indians rejected that offer for no rhyme or reason. Now, either you have a solution, a negotiated solution, or you have the wherewithal, the military spunk to fight the Chinese, which we don't have. We suffered a catastrophic defeat in 62, and despite all talk of fighting two-front war and this thing and that thing, I don't think the Indian army is really capable of pushing the Chinese back. That is why the Indian defense minister always makes statements like, कि हम मुंह तोड़ जवाब देंगे. Wonderful, I like it. That shows a defensive mentality. There is no aggressive plan with the Indian army that in case there's a war with China, whether the Indian strike force will be able to strike through Sikkim and try and capture Lhasa. I don't think there's anything like that at all. It's a defensive mindset, and historically we know, and the principles of war also tell us, that when you make defense as your priority, you are apt to lose. You must remember that in the Second World War, the French had a very formidable defense against Germany with the Maginot Line, but the whole thing was breached in 40 days and all over by the shouting. Well, gentlemen, I will only suggest now that Mr. Narendra Modi should get down to brass tacks, negotiate with the Chinese, and there's no question of sitting on pride because the fact remains that India is militarily and economically and industrially much inferior to China. I mean, as an Indian, one should recognize the right strain, the right view. It's important that we are realistic. At the same time, we don't have to be scared of China at all. There's nothing to be scared of. The Chinese are not ogres or devils or something like that, that we can't fight them. Though India is handicapped, we haven't built up our military capability, which we should have. Gentlemen, we are on the back foot as far as China is concerned. And when a nation is on the back foot and you don't want to create further problems, you have a settlement. Even the Russians and the Chinese, which had border clashes in 69 when many Chinese died, and at one time the Russians had 700,000 troops on the Chinese border, have agreed and signed and demarcated the border between Russia and China, and now both the countries are allies. So this is the example, gentlemen. Narendra Modi has to bite the bullet, and that bullet means accepting reality, handing over Aksai Chin back to the Chinese, stop showing maps with Aksai Chin as part of India, which got no relevance. At the same time, negotiate with the Chinese on Arunachal Pradesh because now they are claiming Arunachal Pradesh as part of China because this is southern Tibet. And it will be a policy for India to rely on the Americans that they're going to come and support us. They will, but only in their own interests. You shouldn't forget that Chiang Kai-shek was their ally for 40 years and they dumped him into the Pacific Ocean in no time when they made the overtures to Mao Zedong and China, and Richard Nixon went there in 72. Well, gentlemen, I will close now and say, Jai Hind, glory to India, and I hope you like this video, share it with your friends and come back for more. And do take care of yourself. Goodbye and God bless.